Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I'm just going to be explaining a little bug that we had in the last video with the animations. If you followed the last episode, you might have noticed it got cut short early, and that's because there was actually a problem that had to be addressed. And essentially, with our animations, it looks all right, but the last frame is actually cut short. And the reason for that, I'll just show you guys, is it looks something like this, our code. I don't know if it was exactly like this, but, oh, it's supposed to be image number take 1, I believe. That could be correct. I'm not sure. Anyways, we're checking that we're on the last frame. And the problem is that it might have been like a larger than or equals to. I'm not 100% sure. There's a couple problems. One is that image index doesn't have to be a whole number. And depending on the speed of our sprite, so if you go into sprite, you can actually see, if I go into like the firing animation, you can actually set frames per second. So we're on 30 frames per second. Depending on that speed, image index will actually increment by a small amount. And the problem is that if we do it something like this, it will only stay on the final frame for, I believe, 1 second. Not 1 second, 1 frame, sorry. It will stay on the last frame for 1 frame, but if our image speed is really slow, so let's say we have our animation speed like 0 point whatever, right? Let's say we have 10 frames per image in our sprite. So it goes 0. So let's say it goes 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5. The problem is that this will switch as soon as it hits 6. So we'll only have 1 frame of the final image in our sprite. And we don't want that. We want it to sit on the final frame for the correct amount of time. So we have to change this. I already did the fix, but I'll just show you how the code is. And we have to change this code here. I'll just comment it out. Into this code here. So instead of just checking that we're like on the last frame, I guess, or we're on the last image, we need to actually check whether or not in the next frame we're going to be at the next image, if that makes sense. We need to check whether or not in the next frame our image index is going to be too large. So we can see what we have to do is calculate the time per frame. And we do that by, if we use sprite get speed and then use the current sprite, that basically returns the frames per second that we have set here, right? So we're going to get the frames per second of our animation, and then we're going to divide it by whatever FPS our game is. You can use there is a inbuilt value FPS, but when I was testing it, it didn't seem to be super consistent for whatever reason. Maybe it was to do with alt tabbing or something. I'm not sure. And FPS real is something a bit different. That's the actual real FPS. Anyways, I know my game is 60 frames per second, so I've just typed 60 in. So if your game's 60 FPS, which is the default, then you just put 60 in here. If you've changed your game to like maybe 30 FPS or 120, whatever you're doing, just change this to be the correct value. And that way we can calculate how long, this is essentially how, time per frame? Yeah, this is essentially, I don't know if it's the time per frame is the correct terminology for this, but this is essentially calculating how much our image index is ticking up by every single frame, right? So I don't know if time per frame is the correct terminology, but anyways, I'm calling it that. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to check. So we add the time per frame to our image index and check that it is, we're checking if it's too big. So we're checking if so the way image index works is that it rounds down. So if we have 5.9 as our image index, it basically floors it, and it's going to be image index number 5 is going to get shown. So we're just checking whether or not, if we have 5 sub images in our sprite, we're just checking whether or not in the next frame, because the next frame we're going to add this much gets added to our image index. We just check if the next frame it's too much. I'm hoping this makes sense. Maybe this makes some kind of sense, but we're just checking. We're adding our image index step. You could think of this might be smarter to call it image index step, which is how much it gets increased, how much image index gets increased by per frame. I might actually just call it, I might rename it to like index per frame or something like that. That might make more sense. So I'll ditch this. And then the reason we have to do this is because our image index automatically loops back to 0. So GameMaker increments image index every frame. And if it's over, like if it's too big, it automatically loops down. So we can never actually check whether it's higher than the current value. So we have to check whether it's going to be higher on the next frame, because if it gets to like 6 and we only have 5 images, then it's going to be, or we only have, I mean, if we had 6 images, the highest index would be 5 because the index starts at 0. But we need to check whether or not, we can't ever check whether it's higher than the final image, because it automatically loops to 0. That's the point I'm trying to make. So we have to check next frame, which is why we have to do this image index per frame, and check that it's greater than the image number, and then we're just going to set the state to idle. So if we have a look at what this looks like, I mean, it's probably going to look pretty similar to what we had before. The animation should work all good. And if we see, it stays on each of the frames the actual correct amount of time as well. So you can see that bum, 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 right? So we stay on all the frames. We don't miss the last frame, which is not a big deal, but I thought I'd make this video just to explore this bug and sort of extend on the last tutorial. But you can see our animations and stuff look pretty beautiful. I mean, beautiful is probably not the word for whatever this is, but everything works. Bug is fixed. All is good. And yeah, we're going to continue with the tutorial. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.